knowing and being curious about the fact that I had just lost a shit ton of weight at a young age, I was curious as to like what has this done to my development. I even noticed like compared to the rest of my family or other kids my age, like even my bone structure, the way I stood, I had the weird like bowed out feet all the time. And so I began to kind of dive into endocrinology. Started to go to my GP, my doctor, and I was like, can we get my blood work done? Can we like see if there's anything that has like happened from this history? And it was a pain in the ass. It felt impossible to get them to listen to me, to at least get like a blood test done. I mean, really anything, because I mean, it's not something that most doctors in America concern themselves with until the problems are already there.
You went through an insane transformation, right? Like you're literally in bodybuilding prep now, and I think at your heaviest you were plus 300 pounds, something like that. So
Yeah, I
give
was
me a
I was
sense of the
320.
scope of that. What were you at your heaviest, and how old were you at the time?
I was my heaviest at I think it was 12 years old. It was either 12 or 13, and that was when I was 5'8", a good 320 pounds. And that was really the last time I weighed myself, so I could have been heavier at my biggest, but yeah, big kid for sure.
Yeah, big kid. Is your family big as well?
Um, kind of. I've actually helped them quite a bit when it comes to their own like health journey. My parents have both lost quite a bit of weight, and it's been up and down in terms of that. But on my dad's side, for the most part, no, everyone is on the leaner side. My grandma is gonna live fucking forever. She's one of those types of people. On my mom's side, though, definitely more health issues. Her mom was morbidly obese and a smoker, and sadly passed away because of that. And yeah, my grandfather is he lives on the reservation in Oklahoma, and he's drinking on dialysis. He lives off of like Twinkies and stuff. And yeah,
Yeah. Did you have an awareness? I mean, especially because you were so young. I mean, to be that big and so young, did you have an awareness when you were 9, 8 that you were overweight? Was that something you could comprehend?
yeah. I mean, so it was around the age of 4 when I really started to like kind of balloon up. Previous to that, I mean, I was a normal kid. Of course, like just through I've always been a very observant kind of kid, and obviously, people around me, especially kids my age, they would look at me different, treat me a little bit different, and I kind of developed this sense of like, okay, so something is different about me. I would say around the age of 9 was when I really recognized what it was, and that was also like, I mean, it was a combination of things, both like just like familial, like economic reasons, the food that we had in the house and everything, and then due to trauma, I mean, I was a stress eater. And to my parents, that was the way they could, make me happy. So I gained a lot of weight very quickly. And it was kind of obvious to me also in the mirror.
Despite your age, you were still able to observe that you look different, right? No matter what. I mean, and kids may not, you don't understand the whole world, but kids are attentive. And I'm sure,
Yeah.
right, you mentioned people treated you differently. Maybe you didn't comprehend it as a health issue, right? I don't think kids have that kind of sense of the consequences of their actions. But for sure, like, you're still navigating the world as a bigger kid. And was
Yeah.
that, and
Yeah.
so for you, like, I don't know, when did you start to try to take proactive steps? Because that's amazing, right? Like, you were even, I mean, you're 20 now. You obviously were able to make tremendous changes as a person who, as a young person, you don't often have that kind of agency. So when
Mm.
did you sort of start to have that sense of self?
Um, well, on the kids thing, kids are brutally honest too. So I did start to experience quite a bit of bullying around like, well, I mean, once I got to middle school, which is where that's going to be most common. That's where I was like, okay, like I'm really unhappy with my state of being. And honestly, I remember like telling myself in my head like I was going to change at some point, but still just through, I mean, it was everything I knew to eat for comfort, And I wasn't necessarily an inactive kid. Like I love to play basketball. I would go outside, skateboard, stuff like that. But still, it was just the food, and it was I like. There's a whole story that I like to tell, but seventh grade was
Mm.
probably like the peak of my weight, but also bullying. And I remember I was going to get jumped by this group of eighth graders because, like, for the first time, I remember kind of standing up for myself. And then, it's a typical, like, middle school movie thing. Everyone gathers around, we're going to fight then and there, but then we don't. And then I'm going to go meet him another time to fight, and it just never falls through. But during that, I remember I was weirdly flexible for my weight. So I
Okay.
was able to kick above my head, stuff like that. I just like had feats like that. And so I started boxing with the water heater in my garage and like shadow boxing. And I was like, you know what? Like, this is kind of fun. And I think it was because of the fear of getting my ass beat. That's kind of when I got into kickboxing at first. I began taking some classes and I was like, this is like kind of enjoyable. Like I was
Mm.
pushing myself and I saw that the people around me too, at like the kickboxing school, they were supportive. And so I started to kind of get a sense of self-belief and, maybe I could change after all. So it was around 12, I mean, at my heaviest when I began kind of making changes. It started with the kickboxing, so first physical activity. And then from there, just through, I mean, I had internet access, right? And
Mm.
that's something that a lot of kids nowadays are blessed with or cursed with. It's a good or bad thing. Story. I started going around like bodybuilding.com forums. I would watch videos from what's his name, Athlete X. Like the older fitness YouTube. So I
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
began cooking for myself, and I'd go out to find ways to buy my own food, or I just ask my parents like, hey, like, can we get more real foods? And yeah, so that was when the diet aspect was incorporated, and then I began dropping weight really quick.
I gotta say, man, I think that's amazing because I feel like a lot of kids in your position would have been too intimidated to even show up to a kickboxing class.
Mhm.
Right, like the fact you were already being bullied. You probably already felt uncomfortable in your skin. You were, I mean, you said you were active, but you weren't like an athlete. I mean, you were willing to put yourself in a totally new situation and just try something scary. Do you
Yeah,
remember that? Like, did it feel like it was a big deal for you to show up at that class?
it was definitely daunting, but at the same time, I mean, there was this buildup of like frustration with myself, frustration with the fact that like this is how I am, the damage has already been done, and like I've always been fairly self-aware for my age. So I mean, I just had these intense emotions, which drove me to push anyways. But it was definitely scary, and like I remember first signing up for membership at the local YMCA. Obviously, I'm scared shitless because I'm in the gym. There's
Yeah.
people around me who are fit. There's like the one or two buff guys who just do the Smith incline, and I don't know. I mean, I guess it was just from the years of like being tired. I was tired of my state, and yeah, there's more I could add there, of course,
No, but
but
no, that makes sense, man. I mean, it sounds like so when I think about motivation, I tend to think about it in positive and negative motivation, right? So positive is reaching for things you want, it's desire. Negative is fleeing from things you don't want, right?
yeah,
Desire versus avoidance. And it sounds to me like you had some pretty strong negative motivation. You were fed up, you didn't like your body, you didn't like your circumstances, and you wanted to get away from it. Like you'll hear the story of someone looking at a picture of Arnold or looking at a picture of Seabum and being like, that's what I want. It sounds like
hmm
for you, it was kind of like, fuck this. I'm tired of this existence. I'm going to get away from it.
it was definitely more of a push factor, and like I say this to a lot of people, and I have an unfinished ebook which I never released, and I remember we talked a little bit about
Yeah,
that, but
yeah.
like I do think that negative emotions can be the strongest driver for action, but at the same time, it's not something. you can rely on forever. And that's for sure.
Again, if you take the metaphor literally, if negative emotions are pushing you, if you're running, you can only run so far, right? So, like at some point, you're going to need something to go towards instead of something that you're running away from. Yeah, I think that resonates with me. I do think, I mean, I will say this: I have worked with clients and just people in general that, like, if they are inclined to be negatively motivated, sometimes you kind of emphasize that, right? Like, you can lean into those feelings to get
Pushing
you
to the pain
started.
points. Yep.
Right? Yeah, you find those pain points, but I agree with you. I don't think you can stay there indefinitely. Most people can't.
Yeah, and I mean a big reason why I even preached that in the first place, or honestly, I mean within my whole like Instagram account and just I don't even really know what I've built or what I'm doing still, obviously because I'm fucking young and still pretty uh, naive, I guess. But it's like a reflection of my own self image and my own journey. I think that's the biggest reason why I preach that because like I could have only relied on those negative
Majinbrah.
emotions for so long, and like I've always been interested in the psychology part of you know I mean just psychology, I guess. Uh, like I've always been curious about how people perceive the world, how you are perceived, um, and so it's been a very long journey for me. I would say more so on the mental side of things than it has on the physical.
Sorry, yeah, you mentioned right. Stress eating was a big part of it. That you used food to comfort yourself. How do you deal with that kind of stress now?
I mean, to this day, I still deal with it.
Yeah,
It's pretty funny. I remember like when I began losing weight, and really for just like the first major half of my weight loss. I think because I was so motivated and I had just this massive momentum that was going. I didn't have an issue with dieting. I didn't have an issue with going back to food for comfort. I mean, I would make like protein mug cakes and shit, but
yeah,
that was
yeah.
the worst of it. It was only after my first like real dedicated time getting lean. I was doing a mock prep for a show for it was back in like winter of 2023. Following that, that's when I had a massive rebound. Um, it's pretty typical for anyone who diets down really hard. And then I found that a lot of these food issues kind of resurfaced, and it's come and gone. And I feel like I'm still pretty far from absolving it or really finding my way to work around it completely. But I mean, through a lot of things such as, I mean, the strategies such as, chewing my food. I've always been one to inhale food, drinking plenty of water and just being present and mindful when I'm eating. Of course, those things help, but also being able to talk to myself. And I'm a big proponent of journaling and meditation. Being able to kind of try and introspect and dive into why I would seek comfort in food in the first place. And I fucking forgot where I was going with that second part. Sorry, I'm new to this podcast stuff, like I said.
No, man, that makes sense. I mean, look, it sounds like you're kind of combining what I would say are internal and external strategies. And I feel
Yeah,
like that's really powerful because I think people will often make this mistake where they're like, I'm gonna diet once I fix myself. Right? They're
hmm
like, I'm gonna do this thing once I've done all the internal work. And it's like, no, like you actually kind of got to do both. It's the old saying of you sort of fake it till you make it, right? It's like
yeah,
you just start to do the things that successful people do, or you try to imitate the habits of people who have the things you want. And maybe internally you're in turmoil, right? Like maybe you're like, I don't want to fucking sit here and chew my food. Like this doesn't feel good. This isn't what I want. But you know that to the people who have the things you want, this is how they behave. Right. So you're
yeah,
kind of faking it, but you're still doing the internal work, which ultimately gets you where you need to be.
yeah, exactly. And the second thing I was going to say is like being able to look at myself and work on my identity. And obviously, being young is like I'm still figuring out what the fuck I'm doing, so
Yeah.
that kind of helps, right? But being able to look at myself and tell myself I am not someone who needs to rely on food for comfort. That has probably been the biggest help out of everything. And like obviously, as I get deeper and deeper into fitness in general, because I don't know if I want to be a bodybuilder. I powerlifted for a while. That was fun. I kind of just want to get massively jacked. Being able to really, really try and emulate the things that, successful people do in those sports, in those realms. Taking it as a personal challenge to see, like, can I do those things despite my background? Like, that's kind of the main key message I want to get across with my content, especially the stuff that's more vulnerable and just kind of me sharing my own journey.
Yeah. So, well, when did you start to post online? How old were you?
Um, it was late 2022. I didn't start with anything fitness related. I had like a little like lifting account once I felt confident enough to post that, and that was when I was powerlifting because I got strong enough to have the Washington State records for my age. Of course, those got beaten quickly after because there's freakishly strong kids coming out of the woodwork. But I actually did music videos for like local artists, and it was all like old school with old camcorders, stuff like that. And like I didn't really have a creative outlet prior to that, so then I was like, I kind of want to make my own. So I made these like music videos of myself, like me lifting. I was kind of a shithead, so me smoking, just doing self
Right.
defense.
Just
But that's where it
degeneracy.
started.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And over time, that kind of gained traction. I made a hashtag called Support Underground Lifting, which kind of it was kind of a joke, but at the same time, the whole like point behind it was like coming from below the baseline and still working your way out. And it got popular, and then more and more people caught on to the like that old school like grimy sort of a video style, especially in fitness. And then yeah, I as of the past year especially, I've definitely been pushing into more personable content, me just talking, sharing my weight loss stuff, educating as best as I can. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if I want to necessarily pursue being an educator because it's a shit show in social media. But as long as I can help others out, like that's still the main goal.
No, that's awesome. And what's your like? What was your preferred music genre of choice? Was it were these like
I
metal bands and shit?
I grew up on old school hip hop,
Yeah, yeah,
so
okay,
I mean that was a heavy inspiration too behind like the type of videos.
right.
Um, but old school hip hop and then underground rap and stuff like that. And also my music taste is like very like I'm eclectic. I listen to everything.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, that was definitely a big inspiration.
that's very cool. And was it? Do you remember? I mean, this is the same kind of question I asked you before. But were you originally intimidated to post stuff online? Did it feel like, vulnerable and you were exposing yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember it took a lot of balls for me to just post that first video. But my friends told me like, dude, this is sick. Like you should keep doing that. And I mean, to this day, like I still feel nervous to post. I still feel nervous to put myself out there, whether it's through a video expression, like the little music video bullshits, or it's me actually talking and sharing things that a lot of people might not be comfortable sharing. I still doubt myself, but I mean, it's a practice thing, right? Just like
Yeah,
anything else, the
yeah,
more
yeah,
you
yeah.
do it, the better you
You
get at it.
get. Yeah, the more you do it, the better at it you get, for sure. What do you
And
feel like? I don't know. At this point, how comfortable do you sort of feel in your own body? Do you still struggle with those kinds of issues too?
well, right now, considering this is my first like real prep for a show, right now, not so great. But that's how it is for everyone, as far
Yeah.
as I know. But yeah, after losing the weight, I had pretty severe loose skin, especially in the chest area. I had some massive badonkers when I was bigger, and that was my biggest insecurity. I remember, like I remember sitting in my room and I would like grip it myself and just feel so much despair. And I'm like, dude, I'm never gonna be a normal person. It was intense. Those emotions are intense. and I feel like a lot of people can relate to that in some way or another. And in, I think it was mid 2022, basically I found a really good doctor who helped me kind of word things correctly to our insurance company to help cover the surgery for the chest, because that was the worst of it. And after getting that surgery, being able to wear a shirt, like a normal fitting shirt for the first time, and not slouch over, being able to puff my chest out, it was honestly life changing. And that helped massively. But even then, I still have loose skin around my arms, my stomach, and very often, I look in the mirror and I still feel like that same fat kid or that kid with the saggy titties. And the internet is mean, so you get hate comments here and there. That's another thing where it's like through practice, just being able to kind of block it out. I definitely feel much more confident in myself. To answer your question, sorry,
No, man, that's
but
awesome.
it's still a work in progress, and I've come to the consensus that that's okay. Like, it's okay to not ever feel 100% satisfied, and if I did, well, then, I mean, I feel like my goals wouldn't really be as worth striving for.
No, yeah, man. I mean, look, dude, I'm 39. I'm not there. I don't know that I've ever been satisfied with anything. I mean, obviously, like you have to negotiate with yourself and figure out what you can make peace with, right? Like I know I'm never gonna bench 600 pounds. You know what I mean? Like I'm 5'9". I'm never gonna be taller, right? I'm only gonna be as smart as I am. I'm only gonna get dumber as I get older. There's things you do have to accept, but no, I think a certain level of ambition is necessary, right? It's when it becomes dangerous and toxic is when it translates into self-contempt, right? And it doesn't sound like you're in that place, which is awesome. And I do, and kind of on that note, I don't know, like, and I'm not asking you to speak for the internet, right? But like, what is it? You mentioned, you were bullied as a kid. You mentioned people can be mean. Like, do you think about what is it that makes people so unsympathetic towards the overweight, right? Because people are fucking mean to kids who are fat, and it's
Yeah.
like I mean, it's like you were 12, right? Like, how can we, even in a world of maximum personal responsibility, how can we possibly blame you? How can we possibly judge you? But we do, right? We absolutely do. Have you, like, I don't know, what's your sort of theory about that?
Well, I mean, it's a tricky thing to navigate because my journey kind of started out of that negative driver. It
Yeah,
was
right.
honestly once I was bullied hard enough that I really decided to change. And I feel like very few people, as far as I know, as far as the people I've spoken to who have also made a massive weight loss transformation, or they went from skinny to muscular, whatever it is, typically it's the same. Like, it's out of some sort of negative driver and people being assholes. Sorry, could you repeat the question?
No, yeah. What I mean, wait, I'm just asking you, like, why? What do you think is it? Why are people so judgmental towards fat people or overweight people? And I think, and part of what you're saying, and you're reflecting on your own experience. You're saying, like, hey, well, yes, people are bad, but it was actually that negativity was part of what motivated you. And again, I
Yeah.
don't think you're saying that should
Yeah.
justify bullying, right? But it's a complicated topic because if
I,
you
I
hadn't had
really,
that negative push, I don't
yeah,
know, right?
I really do wonder if there's some sort of golden balance there. Um, because, maybe you do need a little bit of that. And I'm someone who, because of my environment, my upbringing, and the way that my parents functioned, and I love my parents dearly, by the way. I don't 100% blame them for how big I got when I was younger. But because of that, I was never really pushed. And I think there is some push that is necessary, especially for kids. It's weird because I found that after long enough not being obese myself, like, I'll still kind of I will look at people who are overweight,
Mhm.
and sometimes I'm like, yeah, dude, like, eat a fucking salad, like, move more, do the things that I did.
Right, right.
And that's partly because I did it myself, and I'm like, well, I know what was the hardest of it and what was easier, and obviously that differs person to person, right? But at the end of the day, it really is just effort that will get you to those physical goals. Um, so I think there's like some value in not being an asshole towards fat kids or fat people, but still being honest, like being honest and spreading awareness of the fact that it's really not okay. If it's your personal choice and you just want to be like that, if you want to eat yourself to death, I mean, go for it. It's uh, we can't really do anything about that. People make their own choices, but I think if we can all be more aware of the negatives of it, and I personally don't think we should promote it. Obviously, that's been a very controversial topic in the past few years. I mean, always, but especially in the past few years with body positivity and big focus on that. Yeah, I think awareness is the most important part. Second to that is positive, like reassurance, or
Yeah, yeah.
trying to get people to change for the sake of themselves, for the sake of bettering their health. And then third to that is probably being a dick, because a lot of us do need that. Depends on who the person is, and their personality, how they react to it.
Yeah, and I think I think that point is really key. Is that you know you can do it in a way where you're essentially punching down, right? Like I'm not someone. I was a little. I've never been truly overweight. I've been like a little pudgy, but like so for me, honestly, it's coming from a place of if I'm coming with that kind of negative energy, it's just coming from a place of judgment, right? It's not coming from a place of actual empathy and experience. I'm just looking at you and I'm saying, hey, you're different, and that's wrong. But I think for you, having sort of walked in those shoes, it makes sense to me that like when you see someone who's overweight, you think, hey man, put down the pizza or whatever, because you yourself have gone through that. So I feel like you would be, again, we're not advocating for bullying, but if somebody's going to give a harsh message, you're a better messenger, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you've gone through that. And I think
And
that
and that's
people
something I
I
see
think
firsthand. That's something I see firsthand with the people that reach out to me and they ask for help, or they tell me that like I help them through my content or whatever. Um, it's the fact that there's some relatability there, and I think
yeah.
that's why people follow me in the first place.
Right. I mean like nobody wants to learn how to get rich from the trust fund kid, right? Like he doesn't have anything to offer you. Nobody wants to learn how to play basketball from the guy who's 7'2".
Mm-hmm. Trying
It's
out
the
for
summer.
walking.
It's the what's that? How long? What's your what's like your typical walk? Are you trying to get a certain amount of steps?
Yeah, I aim for at the very on training days at the very least 10K outside of 30 minutes of fasted cardio in the morning, which is
Hmm.
already a decent amount. But I've been doing fasted cardio for a long time, not consistently. And then rest days, because I mean I'm not training. I'll aim for 15K or more.
Hmm. Yeah.
It makes it a lot easier being here with the sun out. And I always preach to people like get outside as much as you can for activity, because I mean you know all the benefits to that, but
Oh,
yeah,
and honestly, walking on a treadmill inside sucks, right? Like it makes you feel like a crazy person.
yeah.
You
I,
know
I
what I mean?
got I got the walking pad for my little office thing at home,
Yeah.
and at first I was like, this is amazing because now I'm getting my steps effortlessly. But when your head is bobbing and you're trying to read something, you're talking to people, it almost makes you not want to work. So
No, totally.
yeah, and now that the weather's finally clearing up for most people, for people who have seasons, then yeah, it makes it a lot better.
Yeah, for sure. So you're in prep now. So let's wind the clock back a little bit. So when did you? Because you're 20, you're in prep. When did you turn enhanced? When did you turn to that?
So like I said to you before we began recording, being a kid with internet access, I've always been very curious and observant, um, and I was smarter like compared to my classmates.
I can say it. You're a smart dude. It's very clear. Sorry, you don't have to say it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I appreciate
yeah.
that. Getting to talk to smart people definitely makes you feel dumber. So, and no, that's a blessing that I have, being able to talk to a lot of great and intelligent people. But sorry, reel it back. The question was,
Just how did you go? How did you get into gear?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So knowing and being curious about the fact that I had just lost a shit ton of weight at a young age, I was curious as to like what has this done to my development? Because I even noticed like compared to the rest of my family or other kids my age, like even my bone structure, the way I stood, I had the weird like bowed out feet all the time.
Yeah,
I knew that something
wide
was
hip
up.
structure, narrower
Yeah,
shoulders,
yeah.
right?
I was built. I've always been built like a little Simone kid, even though that's what me and my coach say. I was curious as to like what the lasting effects of that were, and so I began to kind of dive into endocrinology, and that was just through like my own like online interest. I just began reading about it, watching videos. I even taught myself to read like actual research papers. I'd go on PubMed, and that made me feel super smart at the age of 15. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but the more I learned about it, I became worried and still having a lot of insecurity about, just my body in general. And like I had such a baby face, I had this very tiny button nose and kind of signs that there was some sort of delayed or even precocious development with obesity. It's precocious. The onset is quicker, but it ends quicker as well. I started to go to my GP, my doctor, and I was like, can we get my blood work done? Can we like see like if there's anything that has like happened from this history? And it was a pain in the ass. There was it felt impossible to get them to listen to me. To at least get like a blood test done, or really anything, because it's not something that most doctors in America concern themselves with until the problems are already there. But that's a whole separate topic. I remember when I was 15, I finally got my doctor to agree to get my blood work done, my
Mhm.
testosterone checked, and a
Yeah.
few other hormones, and it came back at 312 total.
Which
Super
for
high.
15 is, yeah.
Yeah, and this was
There's,
already after I'd lost the weight. I had a
right.
very, relatively, I had a very healthy lifestyle. Like I was cooking all of my own food. I was active.
Hmm.
Um, I was eating very
Were you, were you
micronutrient
like,
dense.
were you like 200 pounds? Were you like 160? We'll give you an
Um,
example.
I I got down
Yeah.
to my lowest at 150, and then built muscle. I was around like 160, 170,
Yeah, yeah.
somewhere in there.
Okay, so yeah, so you were like a lean, wiry kid at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously, I look at that and I'm like, well, that's not good, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But of course, it's within the reference range, according to the reference range, I guess. So they were like, well, nothing to worry about. Can't really do anything about it. That's that. And from there, that was another driver in terms of like, I was kind of angry. I was like, why can't we like do something about this? Or at least, like, can I be pointed to where I can learn more about it by my doctors,
Hmm.
anything like that?
Right.
And so that's where I began an interest in like TRT, uh, testosterone replacement therapy. And of course, that's not likely going to happen when you're 15. And it's a good thing I didn't actually pursue that to the best of my ability, and maybe it would have happened. I could have gone on TRT at that young of an age. I don't think that would have been the best choice. So that in combination with me getting into fitness and bodybuilding, and then my goals are getting loftier and loftier. Like instead of looking at someone who's just like semi-athletic as a build to strive for, I was looking at like Evan Setsapani, who is one of my favorites because he was a fat kid.
Hmm.
Um,
Right. And he's huge.
yeah, he's fucking massive.
Yeah.
So that became the new goal, and I was like, okay, well, those things were starting to intersect, and so I began an interest in more of like the full scale like PED performance enhancement side of things. And again, at that point, I had already kind of taught myself to learn about it. And then it was also during the time that like More Plates, More Dates had gained popularity. I remember watching him back before he had 50,000 subscribers or so. and it was becoming a lot more common that you'd see that type of content. And yeah, I mean, I just became very interested and perplexed, and I just thought this shit is like cool. You can like, though it's not a healthy mindset for most people, or if anyone, I was like, you can basically hack yourself, right? And that's where the whole biohacking shit comes from, which is I'm not the biggest fan of that term, but again, separate conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, I told myself, okay, I am still too young to really fuck myself up by jumping the gun and beginning any of this. Obviously, my parents would not be on board with little 15-year-old, 16-year-old me injecting stuff. So I was like, okay, if I can keep pursuing this muscle growth, bodybuilding, whatever, naturally, by the time I'm 18, I'll be a legal adult and I'll probably be a lot more knowledgeable, or at least have a better sense of both who I am, probably better mental health, and then just a knowledge base of like, how do you do this in a way that is not going to kill you, right? So I was like, okay, when I'm 18, if I'm doing well in those avenues, then I'll go ahead and start and pull the trigger.
Mhm.
And so I did.
But so the last thing you were saying was that you were waiting until you were 18. You wanted to make sure you were, committed and dedicated, and
Yeah,
and you just wanted to be older too.
yeah, exactly. So at that time, I had a coach since I was the age of 15 because I want to get into powerlifting, and he's still one of my greatest friends and mentors to this day. And back when I was younger too, like I remember talking to him about it, and this was also when things like enclomiphene and enclomiphene had become
Clomid and
popular,
yeah, yeah.
stuff like that, like alternatives to CRT. And I was like, oh, I could do that and try it out, and I'm very glad I didn't. But I would like run that stuff by him, and he was like, I think we should wait. And
Good.
if we wait, we should just do it the right way. And I was like, yeah, that's probably a good idea. Um, but yeah, once I was 18, and it was the end of that like mock prep I did, where I got fairly damn lean. I looked great naturally. Like I got up to a good 183 with like glute striations, even with the loose skin. Um, that was when I pulled the trigger and started with tests, of course. And it was 200 tests. And of course, started growing like a weed from that. That's where that whole side of things started. And my interest in pharmacology still remains. I feel like I was almost hyper obsessive about it, like not really dedicating as much time towards learning or putting my learning into other things. And so I'm kind of trying to take a step back from that, especially when it comes to the content I post, because
Mhm.
with an audience that is very mixed, either people who are just there for the weight loss or it's younger guys. I don't want to promote it necessarily. I still want to educate and help people, if they do choose to do it the right way. But yeah, so I'm kind of trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of important notes in your story, right? I mean, for one, I think it's amazing that you had the self-control and the wherewithal to wait. I mean, dude, like when I was 14, I didn't know anything about lifting. That was what I was into. But like when I was 14, I was taking acid and selling pot. Like,
Well, I
I
mean,
mean,
I
like,
was doing all that stuff
right? But I mean,
too,
like,
but
right. So you still recognized even in that climate, right? You're making rap videos. You're probably right. You've got jerk off degenerate friends like we all do,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And you're still like, but this stuff I need to wait on. Like
yeah,
that's I mean, like there
exactly.
was something. Yeah, you were able to recognize. I don't know. Do you think was it out of just a? I mean, it sounds like you had some positive influences, right? You mentioned your
Yeah, yeah.
coach.
My coach, he was. I mean, he was and is to this day. Probably he's been the most profound figure in terms of not only just having guidance uh, for my issues with body image, and then obviously like getting jacked, my goals. But previous to that, because of my upbringing and just the situation with my family and the dysfunction, Um, I didn't really have like a good male figure, so he was very important for that. But yeah, it was that, and then now we have a lot of talk about safer use because more plates, more dates, and all these Vigor Steve, like all these educators on YouTube are starting to talk more about that, and that was a big shift. So that was good timing as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
right. In a different era, that was not a part of the conversation.
yeah,
You know,
and then,
you know, you'll hear people talk about this. So like, right, like Branch Warren used to smoke cigarettes in between leg press sets.
yeah,
Right? Like, I mean, like, there's a badass part, like part of that, but
yeah,
also like,
yeah.
you know, that's not conducive to health, right? That is not a safer use model for sure.
It is funny. With where I'm at now in terms of what I know, what I think I know, and just the general conjecture, the general conjecture around steroid use, which is super messy, but better than before. I would say. Um, Sometimes the whole safer use thing too can be not equally as dangerous, but still dangerous, or at least lead to false beliefs when it comes to PED use.
Tell me more about that. What do you mean?
For example, like a lot of guys, like back in the day, but also today because people are still not the brightest. It was like you start with 500 tests. Any less than that is nothing. That's not even a cycle, right? And of course, it was about cycling. Like you're gonna go on and come off. Kickstart with D-ball, this and that, shit ton of tests and EQ, whatever. And then it shifted to like basically what I did start with, which is like 200 tests. That's it for like this amount of time. And then this and that. And then now it's just only test primo growth. And a lot of people now, they get into it and they're almost for their goals. And this is not me trying to promote misuse or abuse, I guess. But a lot of guys will get into it now almost too cautious, and then they end up with false expectations, which once not meted, that leads to more dangerous decisions. Because then they're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, this shit's not working," so I,
Right. Let's take more.
yeah,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's. Yeah, I think there's a couple things going on, right? I mean, one, I think that there's a sort of false sense of empowerment where people think they can take care of all the negative health risks. They think they
mhm,
can just like, oh, if I take this drug and I take this supplement, I'll be fine. I take this drug and I take this other drug, I'll be fine. It's like, no, at some level, you're at this point, like you're waging chemical warfare against your body. You're
yeah,
not going to get back to baseline. That's just not true. And then the other thing that I think people just really don't recognize is no matter what, there's no scenario like you're 5'8", right? There's no scenario in which being 250 pounds is healthy. No
no,
matter how jacked you are, no matter what your safer use model is, right? Even if you got there on the gentlest cycles of all time, your body was not designed. You know this because you were a bigger person. Your body
mhm.
is not designed to carry around that much flesh, that much organ debt, right?
No.
That's just not a
Whether
thing.
it's muscle or fat,
Yeah, yeah,
a
that's
high
not a
body
thing.
weight is the biggest correlation with mortality rate.
Yeah, yeah, and you can't. I don't care how much telmisartan you take, right? Like I don't care what your glucose management protocol is. Your
Mhm.
body is too big. At some point, you're going to pay that price.
Yeah.
But it is. But again, but also to your point, like it's a tough balance because it's still right. Safer use, more responsible use is still probably better than just
Mhm.
drug abuse, right?
Yeah, I'm very glad that I mean that even became something in the first place, and it's also opened up um, a lot more awareness about it, and there's less stigma. Well, less stigma. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, but people are more open and honest and aware, which is very good in my opinion.
You mentioned that like you feel like you've maybe invested too much learning into PEDs. That was it. But what do you think in like in the past 6 months? What do you think is like the most useful couple things you've learned? Maybe in pharmacology, maybe in training, maybe in nutrition. Like what has made a difference for you recently?
To look like a bodybuilder, you probably want to eat like a bodybuilder, and really nothing is all that new under the sun. Um, I recently made a video where I opened with like mechanical tension is not the main driver for hypertrophy. And it pissed a lot of people off, but it's my belief that well, it's not just my belief, but also this is what I've kind of not stolen, but it's been influenced by my mentors. You know, question everything. Like the whole fitness realm, especially the education, scientific, science based, whatever. It is just like conjecture. It is basically trends, right? So I believe you should pick little pieces from all the different sources you can and piece it together for yourself. Uh, I would say that's the biggest thing when you're learning about any of this stuff, and it can be applied to bodybuilding or whatever pursuit it is. Don't take any one thing as an absolute. And then the whole
Yeah.
like eat like a bodybuilder to look like a bodybuilder. There's a reason why they might, the most successful kind of do the same things altogether, except for in training, which was kind of my point with the whole mechanical tension thing. You know, you can get jacked doing almost anything, especially with PEDs in the mix. But yeah, and don't overthink it, I guess, which
Mhm.
plays into both of those.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a big part of it, right? Like, there's a great saying that success leaves clues. And I think particularly when it comes to bodybuilding, you're right. The highest level bodybuilders, the most successful bodybuilders, they don't all train the same way, but they pretty much eat the same way. And if
Yeah.
you even look at the history of bodybuilding, there was a time before macro tracking.
Mhm.
And now that we do that, people are more shredded. Like it's
Yeah.
just, like it's just true. Right. Like I'm not obviously not digging, the sort of silver and bronze age of bodybuilding. Those guys were amazing. But like doing math makes this shit easier. Right?
Yeah.
And like sticking, and understanding how to manipulate carbs makes this easier. These are actually powerful tools, and I think that the best bodybuilders, yeah, basically, like, right, there's going to be minor differences, but they're going to settle around on the key points. But
Mhm.
training is different. I mean, I think, and you're right. I think a lot of what comes down to is people want concrete, definitive answers. They want to come to you and they want to say, "Hey, man, how do I make my bicep bigger in 2 weeks?" And it's like, well, I don't know, right? Like there's 20 different things you could do. They probably all work. They probably some of them work a little bit better. Some of them don't work as well. You need to find what works for you, and I think more importantly, You need to find what you're willing to do over the
That,
long period of
that,
time,
that takes effort and time.
right?
It's
Man, I
like,
want to fucking work. But like that's if there is a secret to bodybuilding, right? You said don't overthink it. It's don't overthink it, but also do it for a long time,
mhm.
right? Like you've made awesome progress, but if you want to be a huge freak show, it's gonna take you like a decade. That's what happens, right?
That too, patience. That's going. It is, and it is going to be the one thing that keeps getting hammered into me. I need to be patient, and it's just going to take time. I'm not going to reach 250 lean within a year, no matter how much gear I blast, no matter what I do.
No matter what. Yeah, no matter what. What do you think you'll step on stage at now? What are you aiming for?
Well, it's actually pretty interesting, and it's something I've been trying to figure out as I'm not self coaching myself necessarily, but at the same time, there's
Mhm.
a level of control that I have over what's being done. Um, Back in like October, I was the leanest looking I've ever been, both lean and full. But it's because I was like doing a full scale, like my first like full scale blast, I guess. And that was so at a heavier body weight, I looked leaner
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
full.
Sure.
And then I weigh less now, but I look fatter and smaller, which makes sense, right? So, um, wait, my bad. I started like
So
over.
you projected stage weight. It sounds like you're not sure
Oh
because
yeah,
you've
yeah.
been bigger.
Well, I'm
It's a lot of it's going to be compound, essentially influenced.
probably around like mid 180s.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is,
So
I mean,
I'm still
awesome.
I'm still not like huge by any means.
But
Which is
no, but
weird.
you're also 20 and 5 foot. Like that's a yeah. That on stage. That's big.
Yeah,
For sure.
and we'll see because yeah, that previous cut where I looked probably my best yet. I weighed more than I do now. Like I said.
Very cool. What's your kind of I don't know. What would you like to be doing in like 6 to 12 months in terms of your own work?
It's funny. I really like what I do. I really like the fact that I'm able to now. I mean, I still live with my parents, and that's a something I'm very grateful for. Being able to have my own schedule for the most part, and just, I mean, coaching people, it's been awesome. I love being able to do this and help out others and like watch their progress and like have them come to me like, dude, like look at me. It's great.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's a tough thing for me to figure out because I need to scale, but at the same time, with social media, a lot of it is salesmanship, or you're selling some sort of product that to me has always seemed like a very dishonest or kind of sketchy industry in general. So I wish I could just do what I'm doing now, but just scale it in terms of
Hmm.
thing ever. But if I were to think of like the dream lifestyle with my current age and mindset and beliefs, I would love to be someone who's just super jacked. Because of that, I have a good social media following. Because of that, I have some sort of sponsorship, affiliate, whatever.
Hmm.
And then I get
Yeah.
to coach a small client base of people that I love.
Yeah, it is hard to maintain your integrity in an industry like this, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
really is. Because part of it is even if you're not, even if you're totally honest, part of the reason why people will follow you and be attracted to you is because of how you look. And they'll think, well, if I do what Seth does, if I follow him, I'm gonna look like him. And no matter what, that just isn't true,
Mhm.
right? Like it's all your individual results are always going to vary. And even if you gave the best advice in the whole world, that doesn't mean someone's going to be able to replicate your success. And so I think it's really hard. You're selling on some level, even if you're not trying to. You're always selling your body. And I
Yeah.
think that there's just like there's an ick factor there, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like there just is.
And that plays into the whole conversation about PEDs and you know, self
Yeah,
image and being young. And it's, yeah.
yeah, yeah, totally, man. But I mean, I don't know. It seems like it's awesome that you're competing. I feel like this is a good, like, positive focus for all this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm really excited. And again, it's like I'm taking it as a personal challenge to really try and figure out and move past a lot of my uh, eating habits, previous eating habits, which again, like, can resurface. And hopefully through that, I can also show others, like, again, hey, like, I used to be just fucked up with food and I was still struggling with it, but through enough work, I was able to kind of overcome it. That being said, I am definitely a little anxious about the post show period because I know for most first time competitors, that's where the hunger demons really get you.
For sure. Yeah, and I mean, we don't have to go down this road too deeply, but have you thought about the GLP-1s? What's your kind of general opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean that is a whole rabbit hole on its own. Um, I have personally experimented with them, retatrutide in specific, and that was actually the first time in my life where like the food noise, like everyone talks about, the food noise was gone. I was able to go about my day and just focus on everything except like what I'm going to eat next. Because even when I've been consistent with diet, and I'm sure a lot of people relate to this, even when I'm consistent with diet and not necessarily having an issue with adherence, still it's like, what am I going to eat next? Like you become hyper obsessive, right? You know, your Instagram Explorer becomes just like all like local
Oh
restaurants.
yeah, oh yeah, food porn for sure.
Yeah, food porn. So it for me, big game changer. And then knowing what I do know, it does seem to be like these medications, drugs, peptides, or whatever you want to call them. I think truly are like the next step in terms of like the whole biohacking world. Like it's not only something we're seeing change lives, both through, you know, like if it's someone who does get a GLP prescribed through a clinician or someone self medicates. And for both just the sake of losing weight, being healthier, becoming less insulin resistance, or just metabolically unhealthy, or for the sake of something like binging disorder or where it's a mental thing. Now, the struggle with that is like, for me, I've noticed with retatrutide, that appetite suppression, that lack of food noise, does seem to go away after a while, but the other benefits happen. So it's yeah, no, it's a whole field that's really cool to see. And then I know that they're coming out with new ones still, and they have like quadruple pent up whatever the fuck receptor agonists now they're trying to do, and with the androgen receptor and this and that, it's pretty crazy.
From a public health perspective, the GLP-1s are a miracle. I don't think that that's disputable, right? We've essentially, if you look at obesity and think of it as the epidemic that it is, we have failed to address it. And
Mhm.
GLP-1s are absolutely an effective remedy. And I think in general, the data shows that the health consequences are minimal at best, right? The
Yeah,
benefits clearly outweigh the costs. I think the difficulty is for people who may not have a medical need for it, is it worth trying to learn the skill of dieting? Because
yeah,
there is the skill, right? That's not to say I'm not judging people for using it. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but it is also a skill. And if you choose to not develop that skill, does that mean you're essentially going to be drug reliant for the rest of your life? And maybe that's okay, right? I think people can make that decision. But I would say that in general, I want to give people the opportunity to make that choice,
yeah,
right? Try to diet, try to acquire those skills, see how that goes. And if you can't achieve what you want, then there are other interventions we can pursue, right?
yeah. Just as TRT, just as hopping into AAS, performance enhancing drugs. I think that's something that's going to be really important.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It's the same, right? It's the same thing, right? Like you can choose to do whatever you want with your body, but it's important you recognize that like these things will have long-term consequences. And if you're gonna, right, if you're going to hop on test, you're right, you're 18, you're probably going to be on test for your whole life,
Mhm.
right? Realistically. And that's a tough, again, that's a totally valid decision to make, but it's hard to like, man, it is hard to conceptualize that, right? It's hard to, you can't really imagine 60 years, or whatever.
Yeah. It is a scary thought for me personally. The idea of like I will need to take this for the rest of my life. For not with PEDs for some reason.
Yeah, 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 but just in
Those make
general, right? Yeah,
feel
yeah,
strong and jacked and all that, but
right.
these appeals especially. And, it's you see this with both. It's like people will come and ask, should I take testosterone? I'm not making progress in the gym. I'm like, well, are you doing everything else you can naturally? Uh,
Mhm.
are you doing everything you can to raise your testosterone naturally? Are you doing all the things you can do before coming to this massive commitment, both financially, mentally, commitment in all these ways? The same thing with the GLPs. It's like, well, do you know how to eat? And a lot of people don't, and that's why we see stuff with muscle loss and people becoming anemic or nutritional deficiencies. It's because they didn't develop
Right.
those habits first, or at least the awareness.
Yeah, that's right, right, right. I don't think there's any reason to think that those drugs actually cause nutrient deficiencies. It's taking a GLP-1 and coupling it with poor eating habits. Right.
Yeah,
If all you eat is the random, if you used to eat potato chips, candy, and like maybe pasta at night, and now you're just eating potato chips and candy, right? Yeah, you're gonna lose your hair and you're gonna look like shit.
yeah,
That's what's gonna happen to you. But that's just called starvation. That's not a new thing.
yeah. It's a I don't know. There's so many. It's a really cool rabbit hole to dive down.
Yeah, for sure. Well, dude, thanks so much for this, man. It was
Yeah,
awesome
of
to
course.
talk. Really appreciate you taking the time.